Liwei stood over the man, his gaze unwavering, eyes dark and filled with controlled fury. He stepped closer, his presence pressing down like a storm, and told him that now that he had found out who he had been protecting, there was no need to keep him alive, and that he was useless. The man laughed bitterly, saying that since Liwei knew, he was ready to die, that he had nothing to live for, and that Liwei was the one delaying the inevitable. Liwei didn't flinch, moving closer and telling him that he indeed had something to live for, and that it would have been foolish to keep him in the cage all this time without trying to find any clue about who he was, and that even if he thought his existence had been erased, there were still things that were easy to track. Liwei leaned closer and spoke the man's daughter's name, and the man's eyes snapped open, staring at Liwei with a mix of fear and disbelief. Liwei laughed coldly and said that he had met her, that she was a precious little girl, and that it was sad she wouldn't have a father. The man's eyes hardened, and he told Liwei not to dare hurt his daughter, that he could hurt him, but not her, that she was innocent. Liwei smirked and reminded him that when he activated the gas and blasted his house, killing his family, did he even think of his younger sister, the one who was young and innocent and didn't deserve the death she got? The man pleaded, saying he didn't know who would be in the house, that he had been given a task and had to complete it without questioning anything, and begged Liwei not to do anything to his daughter. Liwei's eyes darkened, his presence cold and heavy as he adjusted his gun. Meanwhile, Yan struggled against her bonds. Her body weak as excruciating pain tore through her with each attempt to move her hands, leaving her unable to free herself. She screamed as a gunshot rang through the room, tears streaming down her face, her body trembling. After a few moments, Liwei walked out of the adjoining room, his clothes and face bloody, his presence terrifying, like a predator that could not be stopped. Yan stared at him, trembling at the sight of him, realizing for the first time that he was a monster, bloodthirsty and ruthless, willing to do whatever it took to achieve his goal. She screamed again, trying to move away, and Liwei's dark eyes told her that if she tried anything, she would be next. He turned and left, leaving her shaking, the memory of his presence burning into her mind. Later that night, Amara and the other boot camp participants gathered together, eating and drinking, the chatter around her a dull hum as she checked her cell phone and saw the time. By now, Liwei would have read the note. She hoped it would help him, hoped it could turn him back into the man he used to be. She missed him deeply, but this was the only way she could help him. She stood and walked out to the balcony, pressing her hands to the railing as she tried to control the rush of emotions threatening to overwhelm her. Dr. Zhang approached quietly, asking if she was okay. She nodded without looking at him, trying to steady her voice. He told her that she must be missing home and that she shouldn't worry, that 2 weeks would pass quickly, and the most important thing was that she would learn a lot. He asked her what she had decided to major in, and Amara told him she wanted to focus on surgical oncology. His gaze lingered on her as he said it was a good choice, that it was the field he had also studied. He pulled out his cell phone and showed her pictures from the first surgery he had performed on a cancer patient. Amara moved closer, their heads nearly touching as she examined the photos, smiling at how tiny and young he had looked, and asking if he hadn't been scared. He told her he had been terrified, that the first surgery had changed his life forever. They stayed close, looking at the pictures together, her laughter soft as she teased him for how young he had been. At that very moment, Liwei walked in. He paused at the doorway, his expression cold, dark, eyes locking on her as she stood so close to another man. He watched silently, his thoughts sharp and bitter, wondering if this was the calm, gentle man she had left him for. Liwei stood there, watching them. Amara spun around and froze, startled to see him standing at the doorway, his gaze sharp and unwavering. Her heart pounded. He had found her, come for her. Before she could speak, his voice cut through the air, commanding. He told her to come to him, his eyes piercing into hers, unreadable and cold. He glanced at her again, repeating for emphasis, demanding that she come to him. Dr. Zhang stepped forward, confused and alarmed. He told Liwei that he couldn't just barge in and demand someone he didn't even know to obey him, asking if he was a lunatic. Liwei's eyes, dark and focused, fell on the man's hand touching Amara's, and his fury deepened. He took a step forward, silence heavy around him, and grabbed Amara's hand without a word. Dr. Zhang opened his mouth to protest, but Liwei's sharp gaze silenced him. He told him that he was there for what was his, and that he should mind his own business. Without hesitation, he produced handcuffs, cuffing his hand to Amara's, and began walking out with her. Behind them, everyone stood frozen, murmuring and watching, unsure of what had just unfolded. Liwei sat in the car with Amara as he drove off, the speed on full blast. His focus was entirely on the road, his expression sharp and unreadable, his eyes dark and intense. Amara watched him closely, noting the change in him, and in that moment, she knew the note had worked. She thought about how she would rather have him like this. If this was what it took for him to achieve his goals, she was willing to accept it. The coldness, the darkness, the dominance, and the possessiveness. She was ready to handle all of that if it meant this was the only way he could focus on his mission. Breaking the silence, she told him that she had broken up with him and told him not to find her, asking him why he had come. Liwei's jaw clenched as he abruptly pulled the car over in the middle of the road. He stayed still for a moment, his gaze fixed on the road, before turning sharply to her. He cupped her face, his hands firm on her cheeks, pulling her closer. Leaning in, his eyes were sharp, his gaze piercing, and he made it clear that no one would ever have what belonged to him. Everything he had touched, embraced, kissed, or shared intimacy with was only his, and he would not allow anyone else to claim it. He drew even closer, and reminded her of their promise to be together in this lifetime and the next, emphasizing that it was inevitable. It seemed she was forgetting herself, forgetting who he was and what he was capable of, and he intended to remind her relentlessly until she remembered who he was and what they had promised each other. Amara looked at him, her heart racing. She wondered if she was crazy for loving his dominant side, for loving the thrill of submitting to him. She knew he would never hurt her or use extreme methods, but she relished the power he held over her and the intensity with which he claimed her, asserting that no other man could be with her except him. Releasing her face, Liwei grabbed the steering wheel and continued driving. Amara sat silently, studying him as they drove. Eventually, they pulled up to a penthouse. Both stepped out of the car, and he pulled her close, his grip tight on her waist. Without hesitation, he took out handcuffs, securing one of his hands to hers before they made their way inside the house. As they entered, Kai and Ming, who were sitting together, immediately stood, turning their attention to the couple. Ming's eyes fell on the handcuffs, and he looked at Liwei in disbelief, asking if he had lost his mind and what exactly he was doing. He insisted that he couldn't treat his girlfriend like that. Liwei didn't answer. He just stared at Ming for a moment, his presence unshakable, then continued walking. Ming tried to step forward again, but Kai held him back, telling him to leave them alone. Ming turned to Kai, confusion and shock written across his face, pointing out that Liwei had literally handcuffed his hand to Amara's. Kai chuckled softly, leaning back, and explained that he had spent so much time observing Liwei and Amara that he understood them. This was just who they were, both a little unhinged, a little reckless, but together, perfectly in sync. He added that Amara clearly loved it. If she didn't, she wouldn't be here with him. This was just how they fought, how they handled their issues. They should let them be. Ming blinked, still processing, and asked if Liwei was some kind of dark romance final boss, noting how dominant he was, how he seemed to be stepping straight out of a dark romance novel. Kai leaned closer, voice low and amused, telling him that if Amara loved her dark romance lord, who were they to judge? Ming should stop watching, he said, predicting that soon they would emerge lovey-dovey again, probably with love bites all over their bodies. He told Ming to sit down and relax so they could continue drinking. Ming obeyed, still staring, while Kai took a sip and laughed softly. Kai then asked why Ming had suddenly decided to join him and Liwei in Beijing, considering he had been busy at the clinic. Ming took a slow sip of his beer and admitted he was running from someone. Kai leaned in, eyes sharp, and asked who exactly he was running from. Ming waved the question away, saying it was just someone, and deftly changed the topic. He asked Kai if he wasn't supposed to be by his father's side instead of drinking here. Kai's expression softened, shifting to something more vulnerable. He said he hoped the trip would help clear his mind, noting that being by his father's side most of the time had weighed on him. Ming met his gaze and apologized for judging him, adding that he hoped the trip would help. Kai nodded, a small laugh escaping him, and told him not to dwell on negativity. They should enjoy themselves. They raised their beers in a quiet toast before drinking again, the clink of glass punctuating the tense room. Meanwhile, in the bedroom, Liwei walked in with Amara trailing slightly behind him, the air between them thick with unspoken tension. Without a word, he shut the door, the click of the lock resonating like a heartbeat in the room. He removed the handcuffs and sat on the edge of the bed, his posture deliberate, controlled, every movement radiating power. Amara remained standing, glancing at him in fragments, eyes darting away, unable to hold his gaze. She could feel him everywhere, the weight of his presence, the dominance in his silence. Part of her thrilled at it, craving it, the danger, the control, the way he could make her submit without even speaking. His eyes finally locked onto hers, sharp and unrelenting. His voice, icy and commanding, cut through the thick tension. He reached out and placed the letter she had written to him, and a pack of her pregnancy prevention pills on the bed, never breaking eye contact. He instructed her to explain what the items meant. Amara's gaze flicked between the letter and the pills. She had expected him to ask about the letter, but the pills were a shock. She had never told him about them. She stood frozen, trapped in the intensity of his stare, knowing he expected her to speak, knowing he would not break until she did.